time at the school and then coming and spending another quarter or 500 hours at the fire department, all while being a homeowner, a father, active in his church. This is the kind of work that, no, we don't need to establish. He needs to come and say, this quarter or this year, I have accomplished these things that are outside of my stipend that have made this department more efficient, or have accomplished a methodology to retain firefighters, simplify the process of hiring firefighters. These are good, tangible, quantifiable things. And all I'm saying is that's the type of stuff that is an incentive-based financial package. That's all I'm saying.
It's dangerous to me, John, because we can one year find that his work is exemplary based on what he brings in a report, and the next year say it's not good enough, and we'll give you $1,000 instead of $2,000, or that looks like $777 worth. I mean, where do we draw the line, and how do we do it? And I'm a firm believer that, you know, one of the concerns I believe that I've heard up to this point is, what if the next chief doesn't live up to the salary, or live up to the stipend? I'm sorry, stipend is the correct word. And if I look at, we have to pay the stipend according to the work we'd want to receive out of that. So if we want to pay $3,500 stipend, we'll get $3,500 worth of work, and $5,000 and so on and so forth. I think people work up to what they're expected to be paid, and that's, I think, the case in any situation, whether it's stipend or salary or paid by the hour.
Without question.
So what are we communicating by going this route? If we're going to say we want you to work $3,500 worth plus whatever we determine your work is worth at the end of the year, I think it's ambiguous at best. It doesn't communicate our value to them, and we're talking about $125 a month.
I agree.
To add on to that,
and I agree with Mike in stipulating that no one given a stipend, you cannot quantify the hours for a given stipend. You can't. It's just.
I don't disagree with you. I think 5,000 is still too little, but it's exactly what he's asking for. I think it's fair. I think it's right. I mean, we've discussed. I'll make the motion now and see where it goes. I want to approve, exactly what the personnel committee wrote, what they had suggested, with the exception of the chief stipend, to be $5,000 a year, which was, again, approved by the fire commission, and it's exactly what the chief is asking for. So that's my motion. It's just to do that, but change.
Can we finish comment before motions are made? No.
Well, there's a motion. If it's not seconded,
discuss after.
Yeah, and then you can decline it and make a different motion if it doesn't pass. But
I mean, I'll second it, and I have comment as well then.
Okay, I just have one question before this goes further. My husband is a firefighter, and so the part that we're talking about, the firefighter's hourly wage, that part I would like to abstain on. Do I need to abstain from discussion and everything, or just the part that relates to me personally with the conflict?
I would say the part that relates to you personally and your family.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Cahill.
So I was at the fire commission meeting where we originally approved the 2018 after you proposed one. However, I think after reflecting both on last month's discussion that was held at the meeting, and also kind of looking at the reports that Chief McCoy's brought to us, I think a lot of the projects that have kind of warranted those extra hours this year were not things we'll see every year. They were things like a new truck, upgrading software, which were all excellent projects. But I think I've kind of gone back to, I think the stipend and having a spot bonus on top of that is maybe a better way to do it, because we can't anticipate what years we're going to have all these outstanding projects. And I think too, it is harder to pull back a stipend once it's in policy. So we can always say, well, if we have a chief who works less, we can always pull it back, but I think that's extremely hard to do. So I have kind of shifted, and I now kind of support the personnel, I do support the personnel committee proposal in terms of the chief stipend. Not as a reflection of our current chief, but I think just more as how we need to set it up for future years. And I think too that we also have to remember that the stipend only covers his work as the chief. He still gets paid hourly for responding to calls and training and other things. So I feel the compensation is sufficient for the duties, and then we can always add for extra projects.
Any further discussion?
Not in regards to the stipend, but in regards to Appendix D as a whole. I am to assume then that the probationary training pay and the licensure pay is going by the wayside, and it'll all be under this 13 or 1326?
Correct.
Okay.
I would also like to add that, Dominic, if you have such strong feelings on the stipends as a whole, perhaps the council next year could look at all stipends for the city and see. I do believe that the fire chief stipend, when you take away who's doing it right now, is spot on where it ought to be in relationship to every other stipend in the city. And for that reason, I'm not going to support your motion, but I think it could be an exercise that the council looks at all stipends in 2019.
Who are the other stipend individuals besides the fire chiefs in the city?
You have the, obviously the fire chiefs and then city council.
So the issue then is that the pay isn't comparative? Is that what
That's not my issue.
I'm just trying to unpack the suggestion, but.
I'm just trying to take the person out of the discussion, because this council should be setting policy at that level of where that particular item, that particular stipend should be placed, which I believe is appropriate at the $3,500.
So, obviously I'm in the minority here, and this isn't going to pass. But I would suggest that there's some sort of guideline or something semi-concrete that, this is income for his family and for the chiefs of the future's family, that there's some indication of what would be determined satisfactory for a bonus. I don't think it's right that we essentially expect extra work all year long, and that at the end of the year say yes or no, that was sufficient for a bonus. I don't know anything that operates like that, and if that's the case, I think, would we do that to any other employee in the town? We say, we're not going to give you a bonus unless you can prove that, or we're not going to give you a raise, we're going to give you a bonus at the end of the year if you can prove that you worked above and beyond your regular pay. It seems odd to me. I can't think of any other situation that happens. But yeah, I digress. I just hope we can have some sort of formulated guidelines of what constitutes a bonus or not, and at what level. So.
But I think we already do that by, our administrator is the head of staff, and it's at his discretion to make the spot bonus, because that's who staff reports to, not
Do
to us
you
as
feel?
individuals.
Do you feel you have a grasp of what would be determined?
I can tell you that for me, Justin is the second fire chief I've worked with here in the community, and so I think that both fire chiefs obviously bring some different things to the table. Not trying to step on anyone's toes, but I think that the fire department has been much more progressive, and I think that is a reflection of Fire Chief McCoy's work, and so obviously you can see a difference between his work that he's been doing with the fire chief in comparison to previous chiefs, and that's not a knock on any previous fire chief, but speaks more to Justin and his performance. Yeah, I have no issue with Justin and his work that he's brought, and if council feels comfortable in keeping the stipend at where it's at $3,500, then I would bring forward a request for a spot bonus annually. That's just something I do, because unless the performance dropped off, obviously. But I have a pretty good indication just on how the last year and a half, 2 years have gone with Justin as chief, that I don't believe that's the case. So from a staff standpoint, that's how I'd probably handle it.
And I do appreciate the flexibility that you have to acknowledge the work above and beyond. I mean, when you look at, you know, no one knew that this year there was gonna be a new truck, and no one knew about the awards program that was implemented. You know, just the chief took that initiative, so you were able to, have the flexibility and the freedom to acknowledge that.
And I believe Bobby has that opportunity with any of the staff
Mhm.
members.
Yeah, not just.
In the interest of
stipend.
time, I'd call the question on this motion.
Yes. All right, so we have a motion on the table to approve the fire department proposal and a second with the firefighter stipend at 5,000 and the firefighter hourly wage at 13.26. All in favor?
Is it
It
1325?
was 1325 was the motion, yeah.
Oh,
So it
sorry.
was the personnel committee,
Oh, it's a little bit of both.
yeah, with the exception being the fire chief.
Okay.
Did you seconded that one, Kate? I can't remember.
Yes.
Oh, you
Yes,
did,
it was
okay.
already
So that's what we're
seconded.
voting
Yeah,
on now,
that's what we
okay,
had discussion,
okay.
and it's been called. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Abstaining? Aye. All right, the motion does not pass.
Madam Mayor, I would move that we do this in two pieces to respect your involvement with the firefighters. That first, we approve the firefighter hourly wage of $13.25. So I move that we do that.
There's
I
a
will second that.
motion by DeLuca, second by Fay. Any further discussion of approving the firefighter hourly wage to $13.25 for 2019? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Aye. All right, motion carries.
Now I would move that we set the stipends as outlined in the addendum D from the Personnel Committee at $3,500 for the fire chief, $2,500 for the assistant chief, captain and lieutenants at $2,200, and the training officer stipend at $1,500 if not a captain or a lieutenant.
So we have a motion on the table by Councilmember DeLuca for fire chief stipend $3,500, assistant chief stipend $2,500, captain lieutenant stipend $2,200, and training officer stipend if not a captain or lieutenant $1,500. Looking for a second.
Second.
Second by Cahill. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1. All right. Next item of business is request to draw plans for Northside Park, and I will turn that over to our planner.
Thank you,
Or,
Uh,
sorry.
Honorable Mayor, Council. I know you, the city has taken several steps towards developing a master plan for Northside Park. The city had put together some conceptual plans as well as some imaging that was illustrative of the types of things that could be done to upgrade and then add to Northside Park. And with that, there's been discussion about proceeding with preparing more detailed plans so that that project could be bid. And we had just talked as a staff, and then I know the council talked at their last workshop, just to reflect back on some of the comments that were made at the open house, and also from the council's presentation of it and the Park Commission's review of it. And before I proceeded with putting together a more detailed package for developing this project, I wanted to just get a little bit of feedback and direction from the council relating to the components included in that package. Based on that, I would anticipate we'd put together what I would call kind of a design development package that would scope more closely the development of that park, as well as draw in more detail the development of that park, and then put a estimated cost together for each of the components of that to be brought back to council to then provide direction on what exactly would be included in the bid package. But in order to get to that level, we have to take one more step to put together more detail so we can bring back a better idea of what the overall master plan would cost and what it would take to do. We've got to put some of that together, and that's going to require some more just base development work, survey work, some soil a couple of soil samples maybe, and then just laying out some of these pieces in more detail than what we've done to this point. So far, we've just drawn conceptual plans. So the components that were in the overall master plan that I kind of broke down just as individual elements, the Veterans Plaza. With that plaza, if that was the only thing we were looking at a minimum, we'd be doing soil, drainage, electrical work for what I would call the entire western quarter of Northside Park, from the ball fields to Bud Avenue. So that piece would all get graded properly, drainage, we'd install the electrical, and then, you know, do the plaza if that was the only piece. There was a couple of other pieces that came out of a lot of the discussions. One was the trail system that would connect up Howard and Pioneer, the Pioneer Center. There was the Grand Lawn band shell kind of component, the new picnic shelter component, the update to the existing picnic shelter. And so I just want to kind of get a little bit more direction, clarify to make sure we're on the same page so that we can go off and put that next level effort into preparing more detailed drawings that we can then come back before we go to full construction drawings and give you the information you need to make that next decision point. There is going to be some resources needed to get to that point, but we've got to put some more time into those plans in order to put together a better idea of what kind of costs are associated, what the time frame for construction is, and then are there other decision points. Just as an example, we've talked about this. If we say we want to do a new picnic shelter, there's a wide range in what that could be. It could be custom designed, I mean, with architectural, structural engineering, or it could be prefabbed, you know, from where we just order something essentially and we spec out that order. So there's a wide range, but I think we just need to get to another level, and so I want to make sure before we spend any more time on it that we have a clear direction and from the council. So that's all we're looking for tonight, with the idea that we take this, go back and put that next level work, come back to you in January with a real detailed kind of feasibility level study of what that park is and what costs are associated with that next step, and then what decision points we need to make as it relates to bidding elements of that park so that we can take that, prepare the final bid package, and get it out for a spring, early spring bid, and then 2019 construction.
Could I just ask one thing on the timeline? Do you think it's possible after we would get a bid package just to find out what things would actually cost, especially on an itemized level? Is it possible to include something in the mailed newsletter to the residents, just explaining what we're looking at for costs, and then also just the funding mechanisms that we have in place? Because I think from the feedback I've heard personally, especially the majority of the negative feedback is people are assuming this is going to raise our taxes, and that we don't have any of this raised, but in fact we have what, 140,000 that's going to be set aside for this, Bobby, in park, and then we also have 120 coming in next year with the early, like January, for the project, and then another. So essentially we could have this whole project virtually funded before it actually starts, and I think there's a lot of residents that don't know that, and that is, I think, a lot of the. So can we just have some sort of info put into a mailer? Once we get prices, this is what it's going to cost. This is where all the money is right now, and the timeline we're looking at.
I think if that's something that council would direct staff to do, we'd probably look at doing that probably in our spring quarterly newsletter that we send out, because at that time we'd probably have that information. We wouldn't have that probably by the end of this December to send out, but we can definitely throw some information on our website if that's something the city council wants us to do, and really educate the community and get that information out if that's something council would like us to do.
Even though we wouldn't have the exact numbers, I think it would be helpful to put in the year-end newsletter.
Sure.
Just to stop the rumor mill that taxes aren't going to go up, and to remind people too that the entire park might not be done at one time, that it will be in phases, so we are being fiscally responsible with it.
Correct.
I agree that the January newsletter as well as the April newsletter, because if you wait till April if we follow this timeline, the project's being awarded 25 March, and we won't be putting out the next billing statement until the first week of April, and by that time, we've already committed.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
two, one, and then a second one.
Makes sense.
And also, even though the official open house feedback period was a few weeks ago, a lot of people couldn't make that. So maybe just to include an option to email, to call, whatever, with any other feedback. I think the more
Sure.
feedback we can continue to get, the better. So if people feel strongly, we want to hear.
And we have been
And-
doing that.
Right,
I mean,
absolutely,
It's been
yeah.
in the newspaper and on the website
But
and
just
on Facebook.
reminding
just to
them
Continue to do that.
We have emails. You can send us an email anytime. We love to hear from the public on these things because it's for the public, by the public. So
Absolutely. That sounds good.
just leave no stones unturned. So they have their opportunity to talk to
I
us
think
about it. So.
I think it's clear from council too that anytime we're investing a significant amount of dollars into a project, we want to make sure that we clearly communicate, that how these funds came about and why we're spending these funds. And I think it's going to be an exciting project, and I'm excited. And we'll go draw up some plans, and we'll get something moving. We'll share the good news with everyone. So
Great.
yeah.
I think, sorry,
Go
just to
ahead.
comment on the components, one that I think that is missing, and certainly not in phase one, though, would be play spaces. We even approved a request from Park Commission last summer about a new sand pit area. We had some great feedback at the workshop about making accessible swings so that anyone can use them. So I'd love to see a piece on that about how we can maybe upgrade the spaces, or whether we need they had asked for a newer one closer to ball field so parents could watch and have the kids there, so.
Okay.
Any other feedback?
Mark, three things. I'm sure you've heard we've already established a date of June 1 for the party in the park for next year. My concern would be your current schedule puts spring, summer 2019 as construction, and we're already going full bore into raising funds and committing to bands and things of that nature. And my concern is if we spend the next 6.5 months putting this party together and it gets to be prior to Saturday, June 1, and it's still dirt, we've really shot ourselves in the foot.
I think once we get the kind of scope and we understand better what elements are included and because one of the things we're going to do is once we start laying this out and we start designing it, we're going to go back and put timeframes associated with it,
Right.
what's
We'll know
required.
better.
So I think we're not going to have any
That's
issue being
fair.
able to work around. And when we bid it, we'll be clear on
And-
what is that time
And
or that
then,
window.
when you take the bid package that Dan has put together for us on the street reconstruction that we have, we've got street, we've got storm sewer, we've got water, we've got Maple Ridge and Parkview, and we've got the Highway 12 water main, all 5 of those components, all broken down into each individual package. When you put this together with a handful of different buckets, packages, will the bid package go out in that, so that at that point, if we find that item A came in higher than we expected or less than we could expected, we could either improve upon it or reduce it in size or scope, or?
Yeah, Councilmember, I think it's a great point, and that's our goal. So when we come back in January, we're going to have those decision points as to what is going to be kind of alternately bid and what is going to be kind of hard bid, but we'll have a better sense of where we are with funding and then what we estimate those costs to be, so that we can do exactly what you're saying. So we can bid certain pieces that we're not confident are going to come in at or in budget, or maybe we're kind of on the border. We can break those out at that time. And so I think that will be that next step. Once we come back to you, we'll have those individual projects, so to speak, and we'll decide what's kind of in the main project and maybe what's alternate on that. So
2 more quick things, because I obviously missed the memo. What is Pioneer Center?
well, the community center here, the Pioneer facility, or this building. What are we calling this
Discovery.
building? Discovery Center, and I call it the
You
Pioneer
kept- You were
Center.
talking Pioneer, and I didn't know if you were
Yeah.
talking Independence's Park or the
Yeah,
park
and I
over at
think-
the fire
I think
hall.
I make that
or-
mistake every time, but there, you know, on our master plan, there's that possible
Got
connection
it.
over to there. So yeah, apologize.
And then we're just gonna hold off on doing anything with the improvement to the parking lot until a couple of years from now. Is that correct, Dan? Because,
But there's going to have to be some idea. We're gonna look at grading. We're gonna look at all of that. So we're gonna have to put a little bit of time into what
Okay.
is that parking lot going to be and where does it connect. But I mean, as far as a full design, Dan, do you think we'll be at that?
Well, I mean, it depends on if the council wants it as one of those components or alternates, and so we could, but right, you'll have to make it layout so that it'll work in the future if you're not gonna do it right.
Yeah, and I think so far the direction's been that's gonna be a street project at a future date, and associated with a street project. so.
right, but it, like Dan said, it probably, at least on a smaller scale, be part of, even if it's shaded in gray, just part of the master plan, so you know where the parking lot's gonna lay
Absolutely.
out in relation to curbs and sidewalks and memorials and things of that
It,
nature.
it will be shown on the master plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Any further questions for our planner? Do we need a motion? on this,
Yeah,
Bobby, or
yeah, I
just-
would,
Okay.
I would give a motion to request to, approval to, draw plans for Northside
Master
Park.
plan.
Yep.
All right, so looking for a motion, to prepare the detailed master plan and scope for the park.
So moved.
Moved by Cahill,
Second.
second by Fay. Any further discussion?
The only clarification I'd ask is that we have an agenda item a little further about the naming of the park. So depending on the outcome of that vote could dictate what this project is called.
I strategically put this in front of that, so I knew what to call it on the agenda, so.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's Northside. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Next item of business is approval of the 2040 comp plan.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. The 2040 comp plan has been put together in what I call a draft format. We are at a point now where we'd be looking for council direction to submit, to adopt the draft, submit the plan to surrounding jurisdictions for surrounding jurisdictional review. Surrounding jurisdictions by the Land Use Planning Act have 6 months to review our comprehensive plan. We have gone through quite a process to get to where we are now. I was going to highlight just a couple of key points of the comprehensive plan. If there's more information that the council would like to discuss, please feel free to ask me. I can go into any of the 492 pages in more detail. The document we've spent the better part of the last year and a half putting together. We started with a community survey, looking at what is the community, how is the community set up right now, and what are the things that are important to the community moving forward. When we did that community survey, we presented some just kind of basic information as well as information relating to the 2030 comprehensive plan. And with that, got a lot of good feedback from the community responding to that survey. The comprehensive plan for 2040 is based on the Metropolitan Council's 2040 growth plan, which is a regional growth plan that they put together. Within that regional growth plan, they forecast for the cities, or on behalf of the cities, what they project for population and households, as well as employment, and then other things such as things like affordable housing. And with that, they put out what's called a system statement, and the system statement provides cities with that data that's directly related to each of the communities. So for just perspective and to just kind of get a sense of what Maple Plain has going forward, our current population for right now, or right around 2020, is 1,870 people. The forecasted population is 2,320, so an increase of approximately 500, a little over 500, 550 people over the next 20 years. Along with that, households that are projected, we currently estimate that we have 790 households in the city. By 2040, there is a shown increase of approximately 200 households, which would take us up to 1,000. So you can kind of get a sense of the type of growth that they are still projecting in Maple Plain. Most of that growth is going to come in the form of redevelopment of existing parcels. So a change from a single-family residential property, perhaps, or a change from a commercial industrial property to a mixed-use type development where we may go then more vertical, more dense. And we have strategic areas within the city where we're projecting that. And I'll show the land use map that correlates to that. But that bit of information is really the basis for the comprehensive plan. The city has to determine how are they going to accommodate that growth, where they're going to accommodate that growth, and then what other things is the city going to look to develop or redevelop in the future. Maple Plain in the 2030 comprehensive plan positioned itself, I thought, really well in that they established some flexible mixed-use development, redevelopment areas in the city, which have the ability to accommodate a wide array of potential land uses. And because of that flexibility, a lot of what was done in the 2030 plan is pertinent and has now been taken and carried forward through the 2040 plan. And so I'll show you in the one of the images that I think is probably the most utilized image in comprehensive planning when we talk about comprehensive plans. The land use map, don't do that, is the image that I think most people, planning in particular, associate with the comprehensive plan, because this particular image or graphic really shows what the city is intending to look like in the year or by the year 2040. So I mentioned the flexible land use plans. This pink area here on the north side of Highway 12 that goes up to Main Street and then ultimately to Independence in this corner is our mixed-use gateway district. And that district's been established to promote and allow redevelopment of the land within that area to maximize the land use potential, maximize the value of that land, and then also to bring the city a increased tax base in the form of more commercial retail as well as more mixed-use housing redevelopment in that area. Similarly, on the south side of Highway 12, north of the railroad tracks primarily, and now with the 2040 plan extending all the way down to the south end of the southern municipal boundary at Willow, is the mixed-use downtown district. And one of the changes we've made between 2030 and 2040 is we've extended the mixed-use downtown district along the east side, a little bit along the west side, and all the way down to the southern boundary of County Road 19. We've done that because we feel that there is a connection between those properties as well as kind of a key gateway point coming into the city from the south that we feel should be given flexibility to allow different types of land use to go in there. We changed that primarily from a 2030 designation of office park, which in practice and just over the last 10 years, the city's found to not necessarily correlate with market demand and what people are actually looking for redevelopment opportunity. And so we've changed that, tried to create a more flexible zoning that accommodates more uses, and also then can respond to the market as well as just kind of real estate trends somewhat as different things come into play and come into the market. And then the third mixed-use area is the mixed-use Budd Avenue area that's north of Highway 12, and it's west of Budd Avenue, in between the industrial park and Budd. There's an area there that we've guided, again, with this flexible zoning. The idea, again, being that the city can capitalize on increased commercial tax base to the extent that the market drives some of that, as well as opportunities present themselves for redevelopment of those properties. I would say that those three elements are the biggest elements within the city as it relates to growth and future growth of the city. Our existing residential neighborhood that's south of the railroad to the west, southwest corner of the city, and similarly the residential development to the northeast of the downtown center. Those areas are by and large going to remain what they are today, and as well as our industrial commercial areas. Again, this is to the northwest and to the southeast. those two areas are also going to stay very similar to what we've seen today. And so, to me, this map represents a lot of what we are projecting moving forward with what we think the city's going to look like in the 2040 land use plan. So, I highlighted kind of a little bit about this as it relates to the process, and then if there's other questions relating to the plan itself, I'd be happy to answer those. If the city council were to adopt the 2040 draft plan, the process would look like this. We'd take this plan, we'd send it out to surrounding jurisdictions. We'd take and send our local water management plan out to the surrounding jurisdictions, which would be our local watersheds. They have 6 months to comment on those plans. At the same time, we'd send it to the Metropolitan Council for a preliminary review, hoping that they'd flush out anything that is major, or not even major, but even just little things that need to be corrected or maybe aligned within the plan. And then we take all of that. Once the 6 month review period is up, we'd bring the council, Planning Commission and council back a final version of the 2040 plan to formally adopt, and then submit formally to the Metropolitan Council for their formal review of that. And they have, again, another 180 days really in total to review it once we submit it. So there would be another public hearing opportunity after we get our 6 month window back. We did hold a public hearing at the Planning Commission meeting in November. Planning Commission did a pretty thorough review of the comprehensive plan at that meeting, but we had no public comment at that time that came forward from the comprehensive plan public hearing. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions relating to the plan, any of the pages in the plan. There's a lot of detail that goes into this. There's still some numbering that is going to be configured before we submit this to surrounding jurisdictions. Just our figure table and appendices have to be updated, and we've been just trying to assemble as much of the data as possible. So now we'll kind of go back through, do one more kind of major figure appendix edit, and then we'll be ready to go. So.
And which cities do we share our comp plan with?
So the surrounding is that in the memo? If it's not, so primarily it's going to be the Department of Natural Resources, Minnesota Department of Transportation, both of our watershed districts, the school district, and then as it relates to local jurisdictions, anybody who touches our border. So okay. Medina, Orono, Independence are going to be have a submittal that will be sent out. Okay. And I may have forgotten one, but that's generally the group that we send to. So
thank you.
Mark, that land use diagram that you had up a minute ago.
Yep.
That's not the one that I have in my office, because the houses between Independence and Main Street and then running up Baker Park, when I was on the Planning Commission, we rezoned those to a higher density. So in addition to this mixed use in the Gateway and Bud and downtown where we're going to see this development, we could potentially see that redevelopment of single-family homes turning into a higher density. Why is that not reflected on this?
So it's a good point. It's one that we did kind of put out there a couple of different times when we were doing our public input, and then also discussed it with the Planning Commission. What we went back and looked at, and the area you're talking about, this area right in here.
It's the L, backwards
and
L.
then
Yep.
This area here as well. I went back, I just went property by property. I looked at what was there in terms of the houses that were there, the amount of property, and then what it would take to subdivide or combine two properties. And just my look at it and my professional opinion is those are not ready to redevelop as twin homes, which is what we essentially said. You could basically take a single family, maybe make it twin. But if you looked at the value, the tear down, the land acquisition, and then the rebuild, it just doesn't work.
That comment came up 5.5 years ago.
Yeah, and so what we said is, at the Planning Commission level this time around, is let's not complicate this, and I don't think we're ready for that. Let's simplify it, because one of the things we're getting is with that overlay, you get a lot of questions from people who want to build, say, an accessory structure. They want to add on to their house. Now we've got this overlay that kind of complicates the zoning a little bit. We said, let's just pull it back. Let's focus on the gateway because we haven't gotten that redeveloped yet. If the gateway district redevelops and we start to see a push, that's something we could revisit. If somebody were to come in, the one thing we did say, and we'll note it somehow in the plan, is there are a couple, but it's 3 or 4 properties. I think if those properties wanted to come in for redevelopment, we could look at something unique, a variance or something like that, and do it one at a time, but knowing that we really only have a handful. I think it's 3 or 4 properties in that area that could really.
When I look at your tables buried in this, you show that there was one table that had 5-year increments of percentage increases or decreases of different types of properties. And the trend I thought I was seeing is that over the course of the next 20 years, we're probably going to lose industrial commercial property at the expense of gaining mixed use residential. Is that kind of the idea? Is that?
That's correct. And so this table, the 5-year increment table,
That's the one.
is the one you're talking about.
you
And
can
yeah,
see
that's
the
exactly
increase
right.
in downtown mixed use and general mixed use, but you look at the commercial and industrial, and they're all at substantial decreases.
So that decrease in commercial and industrial and that decrease in low-density residential is reflected in that land use map. And so you're right. We're going to increase this downtown mixed use and general mixed use by taking away some of the existing commercial industrial that's underutilized commercial industrial.
Okay, so
primarily.
it's not like we're going to lose our industrial and commercial tax base at the expense of gaining higher density houses.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're taking underutilized commercial industrial. I apologize, it's a little touchy on my screen, but taking away underutilized commercial industrial. Just as an example, like you see the 8 acres of residential, these homes right here, those would potentially be lost as single family and then gained as mixed use residential, and that's where you see some of those numbers come into play.
Thank you. Any further questions for our planner?
I have a couple thoughts,
Councilmember Gupta?
mainly around the park concept. There's a designation on, I think, page 48 that talks about the uses, and it designates the Native American Indian burial grounds as a park. The library is also designated as a park. And I don't see references to the Meadows Park, which is a city park now. Did those just? In fact, the Meadows Park is missing in almost every piece. If you go down to the park section, that park is completely missed. And I think that's a significant piece. There's also some discussion in the document about the park over by, I'm calling by the water treatment facility that we had talked as a council 8-10 months ago that we really weren't going to put anything into there, yet there's plans in here that would continue to develop that.
I think that's a great comment. The Meadows Park should probably be added. I would agree with that. I think that's just. I think you're right. It's not a public park, but it's a
city
open
owned,
to
yeah,
the
and-
yeah.
Okay. Then, and this is on the page, I believe 128.
Okay.
Talks about the trail system, and it does reference what I call the boardwalk parkway. And let's be honest, is there anybody on this council that thinks we're gonna build a multi-million-dollar boardwalk across the swamp to get to the city of Independence? I don't know, we've talked about that, it's not realistic, I don't know why we have it in the plan.
I think it's a good point. It was brought up by the Planning Commission as well, and then ultimately the discussion was it's a placeholder, and we don't have a better routing, so we just opted at that point to leave it. But the same discussion occurred that it's unrealistic and probably not feasible. But the idea that there would be a connection some way, and we talked about, should we show something on the highway maybe north or south, and where do you show that? And it just, nobody had a better option. So the comment was just leave it at this point, but certainly the council can direct staff to take it out. It's a fair comment.
Okay. And then there's a section on energy conservation, solar access, sustainable development, that piece of it. And it makes reference on page 63
Yeah.
that does having those statements in there, Mark, in any way hand tie or require the city that if we built a facility, say a fire station or a new city hall, that we would be required at that point to build it under a LEED certification, or is it just a guideline?
It's just a guideline.
Okay.
The idea is we're now required, there's a new statutory requirement that we identify solar potential of the city, and then policies or procedures or whatever we're gonna call those to how do we go towards some of that. This is pretty like canned.
No, as long as, I just wanted for the record to make sure
yeah.
that somebody doesn't come back and say, well, look, you approved this back in 2018, and now you gotta build a building that's gonna cost us $5 million versus $4 million.
Yeah, and I don't think in any way, and John could probably speak to that, we're not committing to doing any of that. We're just saying these are some of the tools and opportunities that exist out there. So
we will, I'm sorry, you done?
Nope, I'm done.
We will not see this post any wordsmithing or incorporation of new figures and graphs and things of that nature. You're looking for an approval to proceed with this document as it is, but you're gonna spend some time, because you can't turn this over to Pioneer Sarah Creek.
no, now Pioneer Sarah Creek's we are gonna turn over the local water management plan
right.
is complete, and that's right now it's a chapter. We're gonna convert it to. We're still trying to figure that out. The way that it used to be done is it was an appendix, and now it's. Met Council really wants it as a chapter. We've gotten this comment on a couple of other communities, so now I'm going to just make the change before I submit it to them and get it. But you're right. You're not going to see this again, but you're going to see, this is a draft. And I mean, I'll be totally clear. This is a draft document that we send out.
A Steinbeck novel was easier to comprehend.
You will have an opportunity to review this again once we bring back the comments that we get.
But we'll have comments from all the other affiliated parties at that point. So are we relying on, for example, the DNR or someone to do our corrective measures to this document?
No, the document itself will be cleaned up as it relates to just appendix, tables, figures, numbers. That will all be cleaned. So they'll get a clean document. So what we'll rely on DNR to do is, though, to comment on anything in the plan that they feel that they need to comment on as it relates to, any of the stormwater or anything like that. Met Council will comment. I mean, I'm working on a handful of plans right now, and I've gotten very limited comments back from surrounding jurisdictions. It's just typical.
Three quick things then, and this has to do with that LEED certification. Back on page 66, you talk about sustainability, and then you reference chapter 6. Now, this may have been from the 2030, and you just haven't. Chapter 6 is, I believe, the local service.
It is. It's
water
getting
plan.
changed.
There is nothing in there about sustainability LEED programs.
Right.
Then on page 68, item 10, where you're highlighting land use goals and policies, you come down to the city will encourage highway commercial in the Bud Avenue Highway 12 district. I'm not quite sure what that means. Commercial development? It's just take a note of it. I'm not looking for a comment, just clean up. And then on 113, when you refer to you're talking about the connection of Baker Park to Carver, the path. and you refer to in there that is slated for construction 2024 or later. And I believe the Met Council has appropriated a substantial amount of money to purchase land in order to make that trail a reality much sooner than 2024. It was in the newspaper, and
Yeah.
so.
We can check, I can check on the trail connection.
That's
so.
it.
Good. Yeah, those are good comments.
Good discussion. All right. So with that then, we are looking for a motion to approve the 2040 comprehensive plan with some additions.
Draft, yeah.
Draft. Good word.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Broda,
Second?
second by Councilmember Cahill. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the draft of the 2040 comprehensive plan?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next item of business is the minute policy. I'm going to turn that over to staff.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council. What you have before you is a drafted minute policy, and what I tried doing with not only this minute policy, but then the upcoming snow plowing policy is trying to capture some of the direction that was presented during City Council workshop, and really that direction kind of helped for me to shape the minute policy and the snow plowing policy. But the minute policy here that you see really pushes staff to capture, if it's in a workshop, the direction, and if it's in a business meeting, the action. So that's what we're looking to do there. All workshops in here, I do have a little section that says that we can audio record the workshop, and then we'll store it, and if a resident requests to hear that audio recording, then we'll have that there. Of course, all business meetings already are recorded and posted online in addition to any minutes. So that's really the gist of it. I kind of do put a little, you know, I capture anything that carries extreme importance, legally required or not. I put in here just to give us some a little bit of leeway if there's something we need to record that is not listed here in this policy. It's on staff to be able to do that, yet it doesn't handcuff us. So it kind of gives us that necessary leeway there. But with that, I really focused on kind of capturing the direction that council provided during the last workshop. I'd be happy to answer any questions pertaining to this policy.
Do we know if there are any rules or laws pertaining to audio recording the workshops, how long we'd have to keep them?
No, we're
Or
not.
they'd be
We're
kept
not.
during
We're
a
not
since it's a
required to
workshop?
audio record workshops.
I just didn't know if once
Yeah.
we started, if then there was.
No.
Okay.
What's legally required is the minutes themselves. So, and everything in the policy here is, like I said, is nothing is legal based off of what's in the policy on how to capture minutes.
To your point, Madam Mayor, you could add a clause, for example, at the end of the second paragraph that's something that, like, in keeping with the city's data retention policy or something along those lines. Yeah, just to make sure you capture that out, that it just be kept in the same course and scope with everything else.
Okay, thank you.
Is it also worth noting in the policy that any personal, sensitive, or, you know, if there's legal action, you know, that wouldn't be recorded?
Yeah, that's already, there's already a set of rules for going to closed session and dealing with that we would have to abide by, but I put in there any legal requirements such as an explanation from closed session.
Got
So
it.
be included in the minute.
That kind of blanket over everything.
Anything that carries extreme importance, legally required or not. That's kind of my cover ourselves in the policy
Sure. Okay.
sentence in there. So, yeah.
Bobby, I think you did a nice job of capturing the essence of what we were trying to get at here. I think I'd clean up your language, though, in the all minutes. I don't quite understand. Minutes shall include no matter if a business meeting or workshop meeting. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I can clean that up.
Bobby, I thought the
Mhm.
same thing. There's some commas or hyphens or something along the nature that are missing. Otherwise, it reads poorly. Which brings me to this question: What is the process of adopting a policy? Does it just, is there a motion on it? Does it
Yeah.
get signed by the mayor? Does it
No.
get posted into the newspaper? What happens?
No, it's just a motion and a second, and if the majority of council votes and approves it, then it is a policy.
Then,
Policies are,
then I'd like to see that cleaned up, wordsmithed a little bit so that it's easier, runs off the tongue a little bit easier. I get tongue-tied anyways. And then anything that carries extreme importance, legally required or not, is very vague.
that's the design of that
Okay.
sentence, is to be that vague.
Okay.
So that'd be under your discretion based on the.
If there's something in there that can happen occasionally, if there's something in a minutes, or in a meeting that is discussed that has extreme importance, that should be required to be kept in the minutes.